Congressman Tim Burchett, Congressman of Tennessee, District 2 since 2019. You started in local politics. You're the mayor of Knox County, Tennessee.
For 8 years.
You're Southern Baptist, got into state politics, and now you're at the federal level, obviously in Congress since 2019.
I'm a Christian. I try to be a Christian. I'm not a very good one, but they always say, it's going to wreck religious, the religious belief system. It doesn't wreck it for me. Ezekiel saw the wheel. He talks about a wheel within a wheel, which you would describe what a traditional UFO would be today if you were, the saucer thing. But back then, the most technologically advanced piece of equipment we had was a wheel. I think it talks about them in some translations like hooved feet. So you'd think, a traditional pad that comes out, like you've seen in the science fiction movies. So he's equating this thing, and they'll say, well, it's a vision, it's this, it's that. But you look at any civilization, and go in hieroglyphics, go in the pyramids, the Aztecs, everybody, the Hindus, everybody has these craft in their history that they talk about, and that was way before Al Gore invented the internet. So there's no connection there. And honestly, do you think we're the best that God can do?
No.
No. So I just we're very imperfect, and I'm not worried about them. They don't scare me or anything, because with that technology, if they could travel at whatever they travel at or however they travel, it's beyond my comprehension. But they would have done us in a long time ago if they wanted to.
Do you get a lot of flack within Congress for approaching this subject?
I do, and I suspect some people on my side of the aisle will use it against me when they try to run somebody against me. But I've talked to so many members that are pretty high-profile members, brother, that pulled me off to the side and said, man, I believe in these things. I want to tell you what something happened to me when I was in the military, or when I was a kid out in the field somewhere, or I was, let me tell you what my wife told me, that she saw, or my husband, or whatever. Very many members, and they don't want to come testify because they don't want the heat, and I don't care.
How are you guys deciphering who the real resident experts are?
Well, that's tough. That's why I don't, jump on the first train that comes down the tracks. I feel like there's some false flags. I feel like some people have briefed me on stuff that's not accurate, but they think it's accurate.
Okay.
So they take an oath up to their knowledge. It's real. And I think it is further discredit the UFO community and the people that are out there. The people that knew, like 47, Roswell, the people that knew, they compartmentalized it. It's a different America then. Well, a lot of those people are dead, so there's a complete disconnect after it's been handed off to this department or this department, and now it's in some corporate vault somewhere that has a quasi-governmental relationship. So that we can't get to through FOIA.
Well, there was correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there was a window where there could be no repercussions for somebody blowing the whistle on this stuff.
And that's bogus. I think that's bogus.
That window is closed now, correct?
Yeah. Well, they were allowed to do it. I think they still can, but I don't believe any of it. It's like my pilots told me. They've told me that here's what happens. You spot something, I report it. They're pulled off the flight line. They are debriefed, but it turns out they said they are interrogated for 8 hours. They get this on their record. They get made fun of. I literally had a pilot tell me that they've destroyed video evidence because they don't want to have to go through all that. And what are these guys literally, and the ones that come forward, all they're going to get is abuse. Look at David Grush.
Have you faced any retaliation or reprisals for any of your testimony or anything on these lines?
Yeah, I have to be careful what I say in detail because there is an open whistleblower reprisal investigation on my behalf, and I don't want to compromise that investigation by providing anything that may help provide somebody information. But it was very brutal and very unfortunate, some of the tactics they used to hurt me both professionally and personally, to be quite frank. Yeah.
It's very unfortunate. As they say, when you're over the target, that's when they do the most firing at you. Do you have any personal knowledge of people who have been harmed or injured in efforts to cover up or conceal these extraterrestrial technology?
Yes. personally.
Have anyone been murdered that you would think, that you know of or have heard of, I guess?
I have to be careful asking that question. I directed people with that knowledge to the appropriate authorities.
Maybe in if we could get in a confidential area, SCIF, we could talk about that. But unfortunately, we were denied access to the SCIF, and that's very unfortunate in this scenario.
They made fun of him. They leaked he had PTSD, and they did it legally. Now, let me tell you something. Only in Washington, D.C. can you be critical of somebody for PTSD? Because, brother, that doesn't fly here in Tennessee.
Yeah.
I mean, we celebrate veterans. At least in East Tennessee, we do. In my hometown, we do. And, it's just, to me, it's beyond belief, what they've done.
I made a comment saying, well, if you're going to discredit somebody for PTSD, then you can no longer credit any policemen, any firefighters, any first responders, any woman that's been raped, any child that's been raped, any veteran, anybody.
Everybody is compromised in Washington, brother. We're compromised. The Russians used to use what's called honeypots. You'd travel somewhere and some attractive person, man or female or whatever, they used to do it a lot with gay folks because they could because back the stigma of being a homosexual, and now there's no stigma attached to it. But they would set them up, they'd film it, and then, you're getting ready to make a key vote. Somebody comes, hey, man, heard about you in that motel room on, whatever. And they go, what? And he said, yeah. I said, man, we don't need that to get it. Oh, man, I don't want that out. That'll ruin my family. That's okay, man. We just need your vote on this. Oh, you got it. You got it. And that's how they own your ass. And they do it through jobs. They do it through, trips. It doesn't have to be sexual in nature. They analyze you. They know what they got. And these staffers they are the swamp. Some of them are. They run too much of it, and we allow it.
Back to the whistleblowers. How did you and the rest of the team that you had assembled, how did you guys decide on which 3 you wanted?
I wanted people with firsthand knowledge is what I wanted. And military to me is the ticket.
Yeah.
And I knew if they discredited Grush, we had these 2 pilots. They got nothing. Why would they want to endanger the reputation of their career? I mean, by coming out with this.
Yeah.
They have no ulterior motives. And so, a little prodding, and they came forward.
Mr. Graves, again, I'd like to know, how do you know that these were not our aircraft?
Some of the behaviors that we saw in a working area, we would see these objects being at 0.0 Mach, that's 0 airspeed, over certain pieces of the ground. So what that means, just like a river, if you throw a bobber in, it's going to float downstream. These objects were staying completely stationary in Category 4 hurricane winds. These same objects would then accelerate to supersonic speeds, 1.1, 1.2 Mach, and they would do so in very erratic and quick behaviors that I don't have an explanation for.
2 military pilots, best in the world, best trained, best aircraft, everything. Sworn testimony, swear to God, and before Congress, and that they had chased a craft. You're a military guy. If Russia had that, would they be bogged down in Ukraine? And if China had that, they'd own us more than they do now.
Yeah.
And so the only other alternative is something we've reversed engineered, which means it's something we recovered and are flying it around in our military space, or it's something from outer space. Either way, it's something from outer space. UFOs were spotted in a nuclear reactor, literally shut down. And it's a documented case that these things were spotted in the same period of time in this country. And you've got the Tic Tac videos, Tic Tac like the candy. And they had one of the pilots that was involved in it in the audience, and he was not even allowed to come testify.
What?
So, yeah. So he had gotten in with press credentials, because I'm talking to the guy out there.
Well, you are super knowledgeable on a lot of the events that happen, so I'm going to have you unpack them for the audience because we don't know everything. And let's talk about Roswell and what happened there.
All right. 1947, Roswell, New Mexico. You got to remember, America, it was not the Air Force, it's the Army Air Corps. And that's important because I'm going to tell you something that happened to me later in life dealing with that. A farmer, there was a loud explosion. And later the next day, a farmer was out I'm just paraphrasing all this. Some of this might not be. He found some material. He found what he had said was, look, it was what we'd call a traditional flying saucer. But flying saucer was a terminology that had been used, wasn't quite the terminology, you know. He reported it. The military came in, Army Air Corps at Roswell, and they military intelligence put out a press release, said saucer recovered. Headlines, boom, across the country. Then the next day, they came in and said, oh, it wasn't a flying saucer. It was a hot air balloon. And they bring this poor colonel out, and he's showing, there's famous pictures of him showing it's clearly a couple of some kind of balloon apparatus. So military intelligence went from a flying saucer to a pile of cloth and sticks in 24 hours. And the American public believed it because that's what we're trained to do. We believe our military and we believe the press back then. So it gets kind of it covered up, and there's talk of bodies and craft and everything. And then in a chance conversation later, some people were talking about it in the military, and then it all just came out. Some of them had gotten some of this material, and literally they said you could crinkle it up. And I've heard this in other instances, and you could throw it down on a table and it would come back out to its original shape. There was some of the sticks had hieroglyphics. They said it was a purple hewn to it, I think. Well, the United States Air Force comes out, and I remembered it was called Roswell, case closed is what they called it. And they had this fat second lieutenant. He was a smart aleck. And they gave a press conference, and they said, no, it was a hot air balloon. And they said, well, what about the little people that they found? Well, 3 years later or 4 years later, we did some experiments with dummies. We parachuted dummies down, little small dummies. And we think that people just sort of carried this over a course of 4 or 5 years, and they put this all together into this one story. And I said, what'd you think, Daddy? We watched that press conference on TV. It was early days of cable. And Dad said, that guy was a smart aleck. And I said, and he didn't know what he was talking about. And my dad wasn't a UFO guy or anything. A guy I've known most of my adult life told me about an incident that happened to him in the Navy. He saw me on the one of the UFO shows or something, and he called me. And he told me about an incident in, I believe, the Mediterranean. And this thing just flew over the top of him. Just out, it said as big as he said, I swear to you, it was 2 blocks wide if it was a foot. And he said said they saw it coming in, and, it had the dome on the top, and it was saucer shaped. And he said it just stayed above them. No noise. And they just stood there and looked at it. And it just took off like that. No noise. And then they were just like, what the heck was that, And then they get back in port, and here comes the guys in the suits telling us it's a national security issue. You're not to talk about this. You'll go to the federal penitentiary. Why would Gordo Cooper, one of the most famous Apollo astronauts of all time, he describes an incident where you said Wright-Patterson. They filmed, you can watch the videos, and he describes it. He said they're sitting there, and they filmed it. A craft comes in, a saucer, landing gear comes out. It does. And I'm not sure if anybody got out of it. I'm not sure I can't remember all of it, and then landing gear goes up, it takes off. And they're like, just what the hell was that? And they filmed it, sent it to Wright-Pat. They called the next day, and they said, we don't know what you're talking about.
All right, well, let's start moving into the actual hearing.
Right.
Once again, this is the biggest event ever to happen within the subject matter.
And my buddy Matt Gates walked in, and somebody said, is Gates mad at us? I said, Gates has got his game face on.
Several months ago, my office received a protected disclosure from Eglin Air Force Base indicating that there was a UAP incident that required my attention. I sought a briefing regarding that episode and brought with me Congressman Burchett and Congresswoman Luna. We asked to see any of the evidence that had been taken by flight crew in this endeavor and to observe any radar signature as well as to meet with the flight crew. We were not afforded access to all of the flight crew. And initially, we were not afforded access to images and to radar. Thereafter, we had a bit of a discussion about how authorities flow in the United States of America, and we did see the image. And we did meet with one member of the flight crew who took the image. The image was of something that I am not able to attach to any human capability, either from the United States or from any of our adversaries. And I'm somewhat informed on the matter, having served on the Armed Services Committee for 7 years, having served on the committee that oversees DARPA and advanced technologies for several years. When we spoke with the flight crew, and when he showed us the photo that he'd taken, I asked why the video wasn't engaged, why we didn't have a FLIR system that worked. Here's what he said. They were out on a test mission that day over the Gulf of Mexico. And when you're on a test mission, you're supposed to have clear airspace. Not supposed to be anything that shows up. And they saw a sequence of 4 craft in a clear diamond formation for which there is a radar sequence that I alone have observed in the United States Congress. One of the pilots goes to check out that diamond formation and sees a large floating, what I can only describe as an orb. Again, like I said, not of any human capability that I'm aware of. And when he approached, he said that his radar went down. He said that his FLIR system malfunctioned and that he had to manually take this image from one of the lenses, and it was not automated in collection as you would typically see in a test mission. Have we ever seen multiple craft in a single formation?
I have one particular case, and that was during the gimbal incident. The recording on the AT FLIR system shows a single object that rotates. You hear the pilots refer to a fleet of objects that is not visible on the FLIR system. And that was something that I witnessed during the debrief as part of the radar data on the situational awareness page. I would like to add, however, Congressman, there's a small bit of anger, I would say. I would feel that those pilots are still facing that difficulty in reporting this topic, and they don't have the tools to be able to mitigate this issue. It just goes to show how serious this is and why this is such an important issue for our pilots and for our nation.
It was stated explicitly to me by these test pilots that if you have a UAP experience, the best thing you can do for your career is forget it and not tell anyone. Because any type of reporting, either above the surface or below the surface, does have a perceived consequence to these people. And that is a culture we must change if we want to get to the truth.
Let's talk about some of the roadblocks that you guys faced going into this.
Right.
I know you got turned around at several different military installations.
A reporter set their microphone, handed it to the camera, and said, "Hey, Tim, can I talk to you for a minute?" And this was a reporter from a major network. I said, "Yeah, brother, what's up?" I thought maybe he's in trouble. I don't know. And he said, "Hey, you got this press conference called tomorrow, right?" And I said, Yeah. And he said, "They put you in a room that's under construction." I said, "This is a big event. You can't get in there. There won't be enough room for y'all to even hardly be in there." And I was like, "Really?" And so we did some checking. In fact, every step of the way, they tried to block us. And that always just inspired me to push a little harder, because even the press knew that there's something going on with this thing. Yeah, I went down to, Eglin, I guess, down in Florida, I think. Mm-hmm. Myself and Luna and Matt Gates. They're both from Florida, so I went down there, and we're told we're going to be briefed and see pictures and trying to visualize it all in my head, because it was so predictable, and meet the pilots. So we go into the skiff, which is, James Bond kind of stuff. I don't have a Fitbit, but if you had a Fitbit, you had to take it off. You got a watch or anything electronic or a phone, you had to put it in the little, similar to the things they found the cocaine in at the White House, those kind of compartmentalized things. And so we go in. It's a big room, a lot of brass, a lot of suits, probably CIA or NSA or somebody, I don't know. And, you know, and they gave us a great briefing on some really scary stuff that's going on in and around where they are. And
Can you elaborate on any of that?
not really, because of the that's what I'm saying. This is a trap. We got to get in the skiff to get this information. Well, in some instances, unless it's been put out, which all this stuff, most of this stuff at Eglin was put out by other people in the room. But if they tell you that stuff, it's secret, and you're not allowed to talk about it, unless the press has been out there. But anyway, and that's a trap. You know, that's what they want to do with David Grush. They want let's get him in the skiff. Let's get this information. Well, it's kind of questionable if they do that. If we can even talk about it, you know. Mm-hmm. People say, well, it'll help us devise our questions, and I just think it's a trap. So I just take him at his word, and we go on. But anyway, so Matt basically just says, hey, y'all have, it's not what we said we were coming down here for. And he said, yeah, I appreciate all this, but this isn't what we were told we were going to get to talk to pilots. We were going to see pictures. We were going to get to interview the pilots on what they saw. And they said, you can't do it. You don't have clearance to do it.
You don't have the clearance level.
Yeah. And, which is not true. So technically we're supposed to have the clearance. And Matt said, I tell you what we're going to do. It was like, he said, we're going to come in here. We're going to have a hearing in D.C. and we're going to ask you some questions. And I'm paraphrasing what Matt said, but he said, y'all are going to perjure yourself on something you've said, and we're going to hold you accountable. And said, now, which is it? And they said, well, we're not. And I said, all right. He said, I'm calling Washington. I'm going to only talk to somebody in Washington. So whoever at the Pentagon, Matt, and the general brought us a nice fruit tray, I remember, up there. And the room was bugged, by the way. That was a funny thing. The room was, they had these mics connected and all this other stuff. And it was just, it's typical BS. And so while I was enjoying a delicious fruit tray at government expense, Matt was talking to the Pentagon. And about an hour later, the general came in, and there's one of his people, I can't remember which, said, all right, we're bringing them in. And so we go back down, and they talked. He said these were craft that were none of our enemies or our adversaries or friends had, and nobody in this world had this type of aircraft. Is that correct? And they all said, nope, nobody's got those.
Unanimously, without hesitation?
Without hesitation. I don't know if magnificent's the right word, but it was, you don't ask a question unless you know the answer. I had an amendment on that just said if a commercial pilot, not a armed forces, a commercial pilot spots a UFO or UAP, that when they make that report, that it has to be made to Congress as well. The amendment was not even allowed to be heard. The whip came to me on the House floor and said the intelligence community, not the intelligence committee, but the intelligence community had some problems with that. Unelected bureaucrats, once again. And it wasn't even heard in committee. And to me, that's unacceptable.
Yeah, that's disturbing. Where do you think that the motivation comes from, especially from people in your own party trying to discredit you, or whoever's decision it was to pull you off chair in that hearing? Where's the motivation coming from?
Got too much attention. We were turning over too many stones. Too many people were getting uncomfortable.
So are these people being paid?
I don't know. I don't know what they're doing. Honestly, I mean, it's the swamp. I mean, it's the crookedest thing I've ever been around in my life. But I mean, everybody says, what's your biggest surprise when you got to Washington? That I was not surprised, because it's, it's just human nature, and they play upon it. People want to be liked. They want to be popular. They want to have money. They want power.
All right, one more subject before we wrap this up. 0 point energy.
Right.
I love talking about this subject. What's your opinion on it?
I think it's reality. I just don't think we've got it. We got that genie in the bottle just yet, or if we do, they're not putting it out because it would put them all out of business. And we wouldn't have these wars. Imagine all that energy we spend on energy. I mean, not like energy is in, nuclear or anything like that. All that energy, brain width, we spend on all this stuff and all these wars and all these people that die. We wouldn't need it. We wouldn't need it. Imagine if this world just united behind something. I don't think they ever will, but if it limited what we would be fighting for.
Let me backtrack just real quick for the audience. So 0 point energy is basically technology that enables energy to be free. That means no more utilities, no more fossil fuels, no more any of that stuff. Everything is just powered by energy that is free. And supposedly Nikola Tesla figured this out a long time ago.
Yeah.
And
look what happened to him.
Yep. They confiscated all of his research.
Died alone in a motel room. Broken.
Guy that invented the hydrocar, mysteriously dead.
Yep. In a knife fight, like at his farm.
Yep.
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 All about it.
So you think 0 point energies might be real? Yeah,
I mean, you look at, they used to say, well, they can't make fake diamonds. Well, they're making fake diamonds, and everybody that does it gets bought out. I mean, I've seen well-sourced media programs on these fake diamonds, that going to put De Beers out of business and all this other stuff. And we're finding out these so-called rare earth minerals. Well, guess what? They're not that rare.
Nope.
They're around, and we've just created all these bogus environmental rules to keep us from getting them, or and then certain areas are allowed to get them.
A lot of the people said that was the biggest marketing scam ever.
Absolutely, because they allow a certain amount to go out through their brokers, through their markets, through their marketeers, and it's basically, I think De Beers is the major controller of them.
Yes, it is. So 0 point energy, who do you think holds the technology?
I don't know. It'd have to be, we mentioned the industrial war complex, these multinational corporations.
Do you think it's Lockheed?
I think probably they got some, they'd have to have input in it. They control it, but yet, they're still developing their jet engines and everything else through the process, but because that keeps their money. Once that 0 point comes out, they're all out.
Yeah.
So I feel like if they have it, they're holding on to it to keep us from getting it.